Hi, I'm back. Heather Martin here for You Rule with another Federalist video. This is about Federalist 2. I've got some notes here on my computer, so occasionally I'll refer to that. And I've also got the Federalist papers because I will be reading from this. Please feel free to pull up Federalist papers on your laptop, iPad, iPhone, whatever. Grab your copy of it and let's get into it. So Federalist 2 was written by John Jay. And I just want to give you a little background about John Jay. He was from New York. He was born in New York, and he was also the second governor of New York. He served in many diplomatic roles during the American Revolution, and he also served in the Continental Congress. He was our first Secretary of State, a role he had kind of on an interim basis. And he also was our first Supreme Court Justice. Pretty neat. John Jay is an interesting guy. He was an abolitionist, and he was the founder and president of the New York Manumission Society. As New York governor, John Jay signed a 1799 act into law called an Act for Gradual Abolition of Slavery. Because of this act, by 1827, all slaves had been freed in New York. And this was considered by many historians to be the largest emancipation of slaves before the Civil War in North America. He, however, was a slaveholder, and he had this habit of what he would do is he would buy slaves. I am assuming he bought them when they were quite young, because what he would do is he would buy them, and when they reached adulthood, he would free them. He was also a devout Christian, and he was the vice president and then became the president of the American Bible Society. So let's talk about Federalist 2. I'm going to try to read less from this one. So here we go. Federalist 2, Concerning Dangers from Foreign Force and Influence. For the Independent Journal, Wednesday, October 31st of 1787. And this is great because it was Halloween Day there, and it's almost Halloween here. This is to the people of the state of New York. John Jay begins by reminding readers that they have a very important decision to make. He then says, "Nothing is more certain than the indispensable necessity of government, and it is equally undeniable that whenever and however it is instituted, the people must cede to it some of their natural rights in order to vest it with requisite powers." Again, we can turn to the Declaration of Independence to see the foundational ideals for the Constitution. Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence that God gives us inalienable rights, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. The rights Jefferson referred to are the rights given to all humans by God via the natural law. Jay tells us that government is an indispensable necessity because we need it to secure our natural rights. And when a government is instituted, the people cede some of their rights. They give up some of their rights. What does this mean? And it sounds a little contradictory. How are we more free by giving up our rights? Well, I'm going to do a video on the natural law, and I'm also going to do a video on the Second Treatise of Civil Government by John Locke. And we're going to go all into the natural law, and we'll go into the philosophical foundations for natural law that the writers of the Constitution used, the writers of the Declaration used, and also basically what was promulgated by common sense prior to the American Revolution. So we'll get into all that, but I'm just going to give you my 2-cent explanation here. Basically, people trade their individual ability to punish violators of the natural law for a powerful entity that has clarified the law, provides an impartial judge, and has the strength to punish the violators of the natural law. Say like somebody violated my natural law rights. Rather than me going out and trying to punish this person or possibly setting my family up to do something like that, which could cause a lot of problems, we get an impartial judge to adjudicate the case, and then the state can come in and punish that person who violated my rights, and there won't be a blood feud started, all kinds of things that happen in societies without a good legal system. So this is a big deal, giving up natural rights in order to have a government protect them, right? Who's going to protect your natural rights? Who will avenge you when your rights have been violated? Pay attention, because Jay is going to draw on his knowledge of nations and international politics on this topic that he has set before his readers. And he says, "It is well worthy of consideration, therefore, whether it would conduce more to the interest of the people of America that they should, to all general purposes, be one nation under one federal government, or that they should divide themselves into separate confederacies and give to the head of each the same kind of powers which they are advised to place in one national government." So, will it be better to have one national government and all of the states united, or is it a better idea to break the states up into separate confederacies of like 2 or 3 states and have the people cede authority to the head of their confederacy? Of course, the confederacies have to all get along too, but we'll get there. Jay tells his readers in the next several paragraphs that until lately, everyone agreed that the Union was the key to prosperity. But now there were people, some of whom were former advocates of the Union, who wanted to split into several confederacies. He then writes glowingly and with great affection of the beautiful country which Providence provided. And he writes, "With equal pleasure, I have as often taken notice that Providence has been pleased to give us this one connected country to one united people, a people descended from the same ancestors, speaking the same language, professing the same religion, attached to the same principles of government, very similar in their manners and customs, and who, by their joint counsels, arms, and efforts, fighting side by side throughout a long and bloody war, have nobly established general liberty and independence. This country and this people seem to have been made for each other, and it appears as if it was the design of Providence that an inheritance so proper and convenient for a band of brethren, united to each other by the strongest ties, should never be split into a number of unsocial, jealous, and alien sovereignties." Jay's laying it a bit thick here. The states were much more like small countries. They had very peculiar characters. Yes, they did have things in common, but as we study the founding charters, we're going to do that. We're going to examine the states closer as we go through the Federalist Papers. You're going to find that they're not quite as similar as Jay was kind of getting everyone to, go with him on this idea. He was using some artistic license there, maybe. He then goes on to bring up the government form during the Revolutionary War. And he writes, "It is not to be wondered at that a government instituted in times so inauspicious should on experiment be found greatly deficient and inadequate to the purpose it was intended to answer." The Articles of Confederation were formed basically in the midst, sort of like at the very beginning of the Revolutionary War. There was back and forth with the king prior to the prior to the Battle of Concord, and the Constitutional Congress was called together, and the Articles of Confederation kind of were right as they were starting to go to war. So it was not a great time to sit and deliberate on matters of government. So then he writes about the Constitutional Convention. And I love what he says here about these guys. This convention, the convention that was called to deliberate over the Articles of Confederation and fix them or totally alter them as they did. He says, "This convention, composed of men who possessed the confidence of the people, and many of whom had become highly distinguished by their patriotism, virtue, and wisdom in times which tried the minds and hearts of men, undertook the arduous task in the mild season of peace, with minds unoccupied by other subjects. They passed many months in cool, uninterrupted, and daily consultation. And finally, without having been awed by power or influenced by any passions except by the love of their country, they presented and recommended to the people the plan produced by their joint and very unanimous councils." Now, that was pretty moving. And no doubt it burned the biscuits off the Anti-Federalists. Just to give you a sense for what the Anti-Federalists were writing about these guys. This comes from, and they were writing, this was about, they were very against the convention, the Constitution, were very incensed by it. This comes from Anti-Federalist 1. And this is just a quote at the very end. He's really piled it on to them. He really didn't like anything about this Constitution. The writer of Anti-Federalist 1 closes with this: "The lawyers in particular keep up an incessant declamation for the Constitution's adoption. Like greedy gudgeons, they long to satiate their voracious stomachs with the golden bait. The numerous tribunals to be erected by the new plan of consolidated empire will find employment for 10 times their present numbers. These are the loaves and fishes for which they hunger. They will probably find it suited to their habits, if not to the habits of the people. There may be reasons for having but few of them in the state convention, lest their own interest be too strongly considered. The time draws near for the choice of delegates. I hope my fellow citizens will look well to the characters of their preference, and remember the old patriots of '75. They have never led them astray, nor need they fear to try them on this momentous occasion. A Federalist." I assume this was before they were given the moniker Anti-Federalist. But this just gives you a sense of the massive amount of distrust coming out of the Anti-Federalist camp. Jay, however, may have already seen the aforementioned Anti-Federalist paper, because after he writes about the wonderful men who were at the Constitutional Convention, he says that Americans should evaluate the Constitution with a cool head and remember that after the Continental Congress of 1774 had made certain recommendations which had proven wise, the press and many government officers railed against that Congress. So it's funny, he went back a year, 1774. But the people were wiser than these members of the press and the members of government. How strange. They trusted the men that they sent there, and they took their advice. If the people trusted those men then, before they had been proven or tested by trials of war, they should most assuredly trust them now. Their patriotism had been proven, and their abilities and skill had been honed. So why not trust these guys after they brought you through all of this trial by fire? Jay wants readers to consider this. The first and every succeeding Congress and the late convention all agreed with the people that the prosperity of America depended on its union. Jay asks why some men are deprecating the union. Why suggest 3 or 4 confederacies instead of one? He writes that the people have always been in favor of a union, and their attachment to the cause of the union rests on great and weighty reasons, which I shall endeavor to develop and explain in ensuing papers. John Jay closes with this: "They who promote the idea of substituting a number of distinct confederacies in the room of the plan of the convention seemed clearly to foresee that the rejection of it would put the continuance of the Union in the utmost jeopardy. That certainly would be the case, and I sincerely wish that it may be as clearly foreseen by every good citizen, that whenever the dissolution of the Union arrives, America will have reason to exclaim in the words of the poet, "Farewell, a long farewell to all my greatness." Dramatic ending. Signed, Publius. The ending, this quote, "Farewell, a long farewell to all my greatness." This comes from William Shakespeare's play, Henry VIII, and it's delivered by Cardinal Wolsey. Cardinal Wolsey had been amassing great power and influence, and he was on the verge of victory, but he got shut down. In context, the quote by Jay makes an even greater impact. And you know I'm all about looking up words, looking up context. So here's some context for you for this quote. Cardinal Wolsey gives, I'm just going to give you a little bit of the speech here. And I believe I've seen this speech delivered by an actor getting drunk as Cardinal Wolsey. I think that's the context that I've seen it in. So I'm not going to give you a clip of it. I'm just going to read it because I don't want to violate YouTube's terms of service and stuff. So anyway, I'm going to just read it out for you. "So farewell to the little good you bear me. Farewell, a long farewell to all my greatness. This is the state of man. Today he puts forth the tender leaves of hopes. Tomorrow blossoms and bare his blushing honors stick upon him. The third day comes a frost, a killing frost. And when he thinks, good, easy man, full surely his greatness is a ripening, nips his root, and then he falls as I do." John Jay is telling the American people that if we give up on the Union, we will have had victory in our grasp, and we'll end up falling in defeat. So, next time, Federalist 3, John Jay is going to really get into the experience that he had, or has had, will continue to have, as a diplomat for America. He saw firsthand all of the political machinations in Europe, which, I mean, that was like a snake den. He saw all this, and he knew exactly how nations behave with one another. And the title of this, Foreign Influence, he's just introducing the title in Federalist 2, but in Federalist 3, he really gets into it, and we really see what goes on behind the scenes in international politics. So I hope you'll join me then for Federalist 3. They just get better and better. So until next time, remember, in a free country, you rule. Thanks a lot.